My name is Nadia Osei and I am 35 years old. 3 weeks ago, my brother rang my doorbell for the first time in 11 years. He did not come alone. He came with our father, a printed spreadsheet, and a speech he had clearly rehearsed in the car. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not ask about my daughter. He did not say I am sorry for anything. He said, "We need to talk about the family property and what you owe us." The spreadsheet had a total at the bottom, $740,000. But here's what my brother and my father did not know. I had been keeping a record of my own for 11 years. Every letter they sent back, every phone call they declined, every family event I was not told about, every message my sister-in-law sent about me to other people that eventually made its way back to me. 33 entries, all documented, all dated, all filed in a green accordion folder. I kept in the filing cabinet in my home office. They came with a spreadsheet of what they wanted. I had a folder of what they did. Before I take you through all of it, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you are new here. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 11 years, to the spring I turned 24 and my family decided I no longer belonged to them. Akosombo, Ghana, that is where my family is from. My parents came to the United States in 1988, settled in Columbus, Ohio, where my father, Emmanuel, built a career as a civil engineer. My mother, Adua, worked as a registered nurse for 30 years. She passed when I was 19, a brain aneurysm on a Sunday morning in March, without warning and without goodbye. My older brother, Kwame, was 23 when she died. He took on the role of family patriarch with a speed that surprised everyone, including my father, who was still too broken to object. Kwame organized the funeral. Kwame managed the estate. Kwame decided how things would be done going forward. He was not unkind about it. He was just certain. He had inherited my father's certainty, along with his jawline and his preference for silence over conversation. I was the quiet one, the one who made straight A's and had no close friends until college, and cried in the library instead of in front of people because crying in front of people felt like giving something away. I left Columbus at 18 on a full academic scholarship to the University of Michigan, mechanical engineering. My mother had braided my hair the night before I left and told me to be so good at what I did that no room could ignore me. She died 11 months later. I flew back. I handled what I needed to handle. I went back to Ann Arbor. I did not stop. I met James Okafor at an engineering symposium in Chicago the spring of my senior year. He was presenting a paper on structural load modeling in high-humidity climates. He was precise and unhurried and explained complex things without condescension. He was from Lagos. He had come to the United States at 22 for graduate school at Northwestern and had never left. He was biracial in a specific way that mattered to my family, in a specific way that I did not understand until it became the center of everything. His mother was Nigerian. His father was Welsh. James had his father's height and his mother's patience, and a way of looking at a problem from 3 angles before he said anything about it. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I knew by the end of the first month that he was the person I intended to build my life with, but I had learned from my mother that knowing something privately and announcing it publicly were 2 different decisions requiring different timing, so I waited. I learned him. He was worth the learning. He proposed in the kitchen of his apartment in Chicago over a meal he had spent 3 hours preparing, because that was James, the kind of man who treated the ordinary moments with the same care as the extraordinary ones. I said yes before he finished the question. I called my father that evening. Emmanuel picked up on the second ring. I told him. There was a pause. 3 seconds. Then he said, "James, the one from Lagos." "Yes, Dad, the one from Lagos." "And his father is from where?" "Wales," Emmanuel said. "I see." 2 words. The kind of 2 words that are an entire sentence with the subject removed. Kwame was on the other line. I did not know he was listening until he said, "We should talk about this in person." I said we should, and I meant it. We drove to Columbus 2 weeks later. Kwame was waiting at the house when we arrived. He had brought his wife Abina, which I had not expected. Abina had her own category of certainty, different from Kwame's, but equally load-bearing. She managed a dental practice in Columbus and had strong opinions about everything, including people she had just met. She looked at James with the particular expression of a woman who had already decided and was simply confirming. My father shook James's hand and asked about his parents and his education and his work. These were fair questions. James answered them with the unhurried clarity that was native to him. Over dinner, things were polite at the surface. Kwame talked about engineering projects. My father talked about Ghana. James contributed thoughtfully. Abina smiled in a way that never quite reached her eyes. After dinner, my father and Kwame sat with me in the kitchen. James was in the living room. I could hear the television. My father spoke quietly. He said that he and Kwame had discussed this, that they had concerns, that a man whose father was Welsh was a man who belonged to another world, and that marriages between worlds produced children who belonged to neither. He said this in the measured voice of a man who believed he was saying something factual and loving simultaneously. I sat very still. Kwame said, "You have options, Nadia." I said, "I know. I have chosen one." They looked at each other. My father said he needed time. Kwame said he hoped I would think carefully. I went back to the living room and sat next to James and said nothing about what had happened in the kitchen, and he could tell from my posture that something had shifted. On the drive back to Chicago, he asked. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Marry you." He nodded once. That was James. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my apartment in Chicago, my father's handwriting on cream paper. He had written 3 pages. The last page said that if I proceeded, I would be making a choice that separated me from my family's blessing, that Kwame agreed, that they could not support what they could not endorse, that the decision was mine, but decisions have cost, and he wanted me to understand the cost before I chose. There was no insult in the letter, no cruelty, just the clean, cold language of a man drawing a line in the conviction that he was right to draw it. I read the letter 4 times. I folded it into thirds. I put it in an envelope and labeled it, "Letter from Dad, March 14th. I did not know why I kept it exactly. Some part of me that had been trained by numbers and precision knew that documentation was the habit of people who understood that memory is unreliable, but paper is not. I put it in a manila folder and put the folder in a kitchen drawer. That was the beginning of what would become the green accordion folder 11 years later. James and I were married in May in a small ceremony in Chicago. 40 guests, all friends, all colleagues, James's mother who flew from Laos and brought food and held my face in her hands and told me I was her daughter now. James's British aunts who came from Cardiff with good wine and better stories. My friend Claudette was my witness. Nobody from my family attended, not my father, not Kwame, not Abina. I had sent invitations. They had each declined in different ways. My father sent a card that said he hoped for my happiness. The card was polite and impersonal like a card from a bank manager. Kwame did not respond. Abina texted a single line. "We wish you well. We wore it the way you wear something you know is armor." We had the ceremony in a rooftop garden venue on the north side. James wore a dark blue suit with a kente cloth tie his mother had brought from Lagos. I wore an ivory dress with hand-embroidered detailing along the hem that I had found in a vintage shop and spent 3 weeks altering myself because I had my mother's skill with a needle and nowhere to put it. Claudette cried. James's aunt from Cardiff danced. James's mother sang something in Yoruba at the table that nobody understood and everyone felt. That night in our apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the flowers, tulips in 3 colors, and my hands were completely still. Not from sadness, from something else. From understanding that I had just closed a door that I had not chosen to close, and that the closing had been done for me by people who believed they were protecting something. In the morning, I opened my manila folder. I added the declined invitation from my father. I labeled it. Item 2. I did not cry. I did not spiral. I filed it. If you are still here, thank you. This story is going to go through some things. Please hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Year 1 was the year of trying anyway. I called my father on his birthday. Voicemail. I left a message that took me 20 minutes to compose, warm but contained. Hi, Dad. Calling to say happy birthday. James and I are settled in Chicago. I'm working at the engineering firm. James is teaching at Northwestern. We would love to see you when you are ready. I miss you. He did not call back. I sent a card for his birthday. It came back 13 days later, not stamped return to sender, just placed back in an envelope with no note. The original card still inside with the envelope unsealed, as though it had been opened and set down and then sent back without comment. I filed it. Item 3. Christmas card sent. Christmas card returned. Item 4. Kwame sent one text message in February. Short. Leave us out of your social media. I had posted a photo of James and me at a restaurant with no tag, no location, no reference to the family. I do not know how Kwame saw it. I know he was looking. I did not respond to the text. I printed it, labeled it, filed it. Item 5. Text from Kwame, February. Request for erasure. By spring of year 1, I understood the shape of what had happened. My father and my brother had drawn a line and were maintaining it with the precision of engineers, which is to say, methodically and without doubt. They believed the line was right. They did not need to be cruel about it. The silence was sufficient. Abina was a different matter. Abina had a social sphere in Columbus that overlapped with people I had grown up with, people who had known my mother, people who attended the Ghanaian community events that had been the texture of my childhood. She did not need to say anything to me directly. She had a community. She worked in it. She shaped what that community understood about my marriage and about my absence from the family. I learned this from Priya, a woman I had known since childhood, who called me in March of year 1 and said carefully, "I just wanted you to know that some things are being said." I asked her to tell me. She did. Abina had told 3 people at the community center that I had married outside my culture against my father's wishes, and that the family was grieving it. She had not said anything false exactly. She had constructed a narrative in which I was the one who had caused the separation and the family was its victim. I thanked Priya. I filed the phone call transcript in the accordion folder. Item 6. In year 2, James was promoted to associate professor. We bought a condo in Lincoln Park. I was made senior structural engineer on a $40 million transit project that I had been building toward for 2 years. Our lives were busy and full, and we were building something real. On Saturdays, we went to the farmer's market. On Sunday mornings, James made full English breakfasts with the efficiency of a man who learned cooking the way he learned everything, systematically and with reference to multiple sources. We visited James's mother in Lagos for 2 weeks in January. She fed us constantly and told stories about James as a child that I stored carefully for later. I had a husband and a life, and I was not diminished, but I was also not grieving. Some wounds do not require ongoing attention to continue costing you. I sent birthday cards to my father and to Kwame in year 2. Both returned. I added them to the folder. A friend from the Columbus community forwarded me a screenshot of an Instagram post from a family event, a Ghanaian community gathering. My father and Kwame and Abina and her parents and several people I had grown up with, captioned, "Family is everything." I was not in the photo. I had not been invited. I looked at my father's face in the photo for a long time. He looked older. He looked fine. He did not look like a man who was actively suffering from the absence of his daughter. He looked like a man who had made peace with a decision and was living inside that peace. I printed the screenshot. Item 9. Filed it. I did not allow myself to look at it again that day. Our daughter Imani was born on a Tuesday in October of year 3. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She came into the world with enormous dark eyes and a particular stillness that the nurses commented on. She looked at everything with a focused intensity that made the midwife say she was going to be a scientist. James held her in the delivery room and talked to her in a low voice, just the two of them having a conversation, as if she had been waiting for him specifically. I watched them from the bed and thought about my mother and felt 2 things simultaneously that were both completely true: grateful and unmoored. James's mother flew from Lagos the week after Imani was born. She arrived with a suitcase full of fabric and spices, and a specific soup, she said, every new mother needed, and proceeded to run our household with joyful precision for 10 days. She held Imani for hours. She taught James how to swaddle correctly. She sat with me in the evenings after Imani went down and talked about her own early motherhood in Lagos, the heat, the community, the way the women around her had carried her through the first months. She said, "You are not alone, Nadia." She meant it about more than just the cooking. I had sent my father the ultrasound photos 5 months before Imani was born. No response. I sent birth announcements. A card for my father, a separate card for Kwame and Abina. All returned. I sent a photo 1 week after Imani was born. Imani in James's arms. James looking at the camera, both of them squinting from the hospital window light. I wrote on the back in my careful print, "Her name is Imani. It means faith." That came back 10 days later. Items 11, 12, 13. Red pen, dated. I held the return photo in my hands for a long time. My daughter's face on a piece of paper that my family had looked at and sent back. I thought about the Imani in the room down the hall, asleep in her bassinet, entirely unaware that she already had a ledger being kept on her behalf. I put the photo in the folder. I closed the folder. I went to check on my daughter. In the 3rd year, I learned something about the geometry of family silence. It is not the noise that tells you the most. It is the places where the noise should be and is not. Imani's first birthday, no card, no message, no acknowledgement. I had not expected one, but not expecting something does not remove the weight of the absence when it arrives. I noted it, filed it, kept going. By year 4, James had started a consultancy. He did it the way he did everything, carefully, methodically, with the appropriate research completed before the first move. He left Northwestern and opened a structural engineering consultancy in Chicago, focused on infrastructure projects in West Africa. His first 2 clients were in Lagos, his third was in Accra. Within 18 months, he had a team of 7 and a reputation in the corridor between Chicago and Lagos that was building momentum. I was still full-time at my firm. Between us, we were working more hours than was sustainable, and were both aware of it, and neither was willing to stop because what we were building was real and stopping would not have been honest. Kwame got married in year 4. I learned about it from Priya, who had received an invitation and called me beforehand because she did not know if I knew. I did not know. The wedding was in Columbus. The Ghanaian community attended. My father walked Abina's younger sister down the aisle as a symbolic gesture, which Priya described in detail I had not asked for. I listened. I thanked her. I sat in my kitchen in Chicago and looked out the window at the lake for a while. Then I sent a wedding gift, hand-selected, well-considered. A set of architectural art prints from a Ghanaian artist James had discovered, framed, and matted. I sent them with a card. "Congratulations. Wishing you both every happiness. Love, Nadia and James." The package came back 17 days later, unopened. Item 18. I opened the binder, added the entry, closed it, put it back. That was the week I moved everything from the manila folders into a proper accordion folder. Green. 11 tabbed sections, 1 for each year with room to expand. Professional habit. If you are going to document, document correctly. Priya remained my line of information from the Columbus world, not because I asked her to be, but because she was the kind of woman who believed that information people deserve to have should not be withheld from them. She called when she had something to tell and was careful about what she shared and how. In year 5, she told me that Abina had told someone at church that I had chosen my career over my family and that James had influenced me away from my culture. The framing was familiar. It was the same narrative with a different detail substituted. I was the agent of my own separation. My family was its recipient. Nothing in the framing required an acknowledgement that my father had written a letter telling me my marriage was a choice with costs, or that Kwame had stood in a kitchen and told me I had options. In the narrative Abina curated, those things had not happened or had happened differently. I filed Priya's call summary. Item 21. Pause here if you would. If you've ever had your own family story told back to you in a version where you were the villain, tell me in the comments, because I think more people have carried this than we say out loud. Subscribe if you have not yet. I promise this story goes somewhere worth staying for. James's consultancy landed its first major government contract in year 6, A bridge rehabilitation project in central Lagos, 9-figure budget, multi-year scope. It was the project that moved his firm from promising to established. He managed it the way he managed everything. Quietly, precisely, without drama, with full attention to the load-bearing elements. I tracked the financial model for the first phase alongside my own work. We hired a part-time bookkeeper and then a full-time one. We moved Imani to a better school. We bought a house in Evanston, 4 bedrooms, a real yard, a garden where James planted things his mother had told him to plant. We were building something from nothing. We were doing it together, and our daughter was watching us do it, which was the part that mattered most. In year 6, I sent what I had decided would be my final birthday card to my father. I had sent one every year. 6 straight years returned, but this time I included a photograph of Imani. She was 5 years old and had recently decided she was interested in bridges, which James had initiated by showing her his project drawings, which she studied with an intensity that made both of us quiet. In the photo, she was at James's drafting table, a pencil in her hand, drawing something on graph paper. On the back of the photo I wrote, "She asks about Ghana sometimes. We tell her it is where part of her family comes from. I wanted you to have this." I sealed it and mailed it and prepared myself for the return stamp. It came back 11 days later, but something was different. The envelope had been opened. The flap had been carefully resealed with a narrow strip of transparent tape, the kind someone uses when they have opened something and then changed their mind. I held it up to the window. The card was inside. The photo was inside. But someone had taken them out, held them, and put them back. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with that envelope in my hands. I thought about my father. About the man who had built a career with his hands and his precision, and who had raised me to value exactness, and who had sent back 6 years of my daughter's life, but who had opened this one, who had looked at his granddaughter drawing at a drafting table, who had held that photo, and who had then, under pressure I could only imagine the shape of, put it back and sent it returned. I set the envelope on the table. I labeled it. Item 24. Birthday card, year 6. Opened and resealed. Photo viewed. Returned. I had suspected it for a while. My father was not the architect of this silence. He had been its co-builder and its enforcer. But the vision had always been Kwame's. Kwame, who had taken over the family when our mother died. Kwame, who organized everything. Kwame, whose wife had built the community narrative. My father had followed Kwame the way he had followed certainty his entire life, because Kwame carried the same certainty he had, and it was easier to follow it than to create friction inside his own house. But the photo had cracked something. I noted it and I waited. Year 7 was the year things began to accelerate. James's firm was growing at a rate we had not modeled conservatively enough. The Lagos Bridge project had generated 2 more government referrals and an introduction to a development finance institution interested in his methodology. He hired a managing director and moved into a purely strategic role. We had 14 employees. We had revenue. We were not wealthy in the way people use that word in certain conversations, but we were financially secure in a way that was genuinely new, a different category from where we had been. I left my firm and joined James's company as chief operating officer. My name was on the company documents next to his for the first time. We had the official certificate framed. Imani asked to hang it in the living room. We put it there. The coverage started small. A Chicago Business Journal profile. A feature in a publication focused on infrastructure development in sub-Saharan Africa. A 30-second mention on a financial podcast that had a large following in the engineering community. None of it was dramatic. All of it was public. And public things find their way to Ohio through the community networks that run in diaspora towns, the way water runs through limestone, slowly and everywhere at once. Priya texted in October. She sounded measured, which was her way of handling information she was not sure how to carry. She wrote, "Your name came up at the community dinner on Saturday. Someone had shared the journal article. Your dad was there." I read the text 3 times, then I wrote back. "What happened?" She said he had been quiet when the article was mentioned, had not said anything, had looked at his plate, but Kwame said something. "What did he say?" "He said you had always been ambitious." She paused in the text exchange, then she added, "He made it sound like that was the explanation, like ambition was why things were the way they are." I understood the sentence. I did not add it to the folder. It was not a document. It was a signal. I wrote it on a sticky note and attached it to the inside cover of the folder because I wanted to remember the moment the recalculation started. The Laos project was picked up by an infrastructure magazine in London in year 8. It ran as a case study on sustainable bridge rehabilitation methodologies in post-colonial urban contexts. 3 pages, James's photo, 2 of his drawings, a small mention of me by title. The magazine had a modest print run, but significant digital distribution in engineering circles. Priya called the week it published. She did not lead with pleasantries. Kwame asked me about James's company at the grocery store. He wanted to know if it was publicly traded. No. He asked about investors. I set down what I was holding. I said, "What exactly did he ask?" She told me. He had asked what the company's approximate valuation was, whether there were plans to expand, whether we had taken on institutional investors or kept it closely held. He was not subtle. He was an engineer. Engineers ask direct questions when they are gathering data. I thanked Priya. I hung up. I sat at my desk and thought about Kwame standing in a grocery store in Columbus asking questions about my husband's company's valuation. I thought about 11 years, the returned envelopes, the unopened wedding gift, the community narrative, the letter from my father, the kitchen conversation where Kwame told me I had options, the silence that followed every card I sent, every call I made, every birth announcement and birthday card and holiday greeting. I sent into a silence that returned everything. 11 years. And now Kwame wanted to know our valuation. I drove to Imani's violin lesson. I sat in the waiting room and listened to her work through a piece she had been struggling with and watched her face when something clicked into place and she played it through without stopping. I thought about what my mother had said the night before I left for university. Be so good at what you do that no room can ignore you. I had been that and they had ignored me anyway. Not because of my work, because of who I loved. And now the work had become large enough that the ignoring was no longer convenient. The valuation conversations in our world were not public events. We had not sought press. We had not issued announcements. But the infrastructure development space is smaller than it appears, and the conversations people have at conferences travel faster than the conference proceedings. By year 9, a private equity firm in London had made an initial inquiry. We did not pursue it. We were not ready to pursue it. But the inquiry existed, and in the world of diaspora community networks that connected Columbus to Chicago, the fact of it had moved through Priya, and through Priya to others before it reached the people who were most interested in its implications. Abina appeared on my LinkedIn. Her name, Abina Mensa, on my profile views. Not her maiden name, her married name, which meant she had made a new account or updated the existing one specifically to be searchable. 3 visits in 1 week. I noted the timestamps. Then Kwame. A week later, his name in my profile views. Then, 2 days after that, a name I did not recognize but whose employer listed a Columbus address and whose profile had been created 4 months earlier, with no photo, no history, only a name and a location. I took screenshots. I filed them. Items 27, 28, 29. The reconnaissance phase had begun. Ame, a woman from the Columbus community whom I had not spoken to in 3 years, sent me a message on Instagram. She said she had been thinking of me and hoped I was well and had the children keeping busy. I do not have children, plural. I have 1 daughter. Ame knew that. We had spoken before Imani was born. The message was not from Amma in any meaningful sense. It was a probe. Someone had asked her to reach out and see what she could find. I replied warmly and said nothing informative. I noted the message. Item 30. Then came the phone call I had been expecting in the shape of a different call. Priya again, a Thursday evening. She sounded different, careful in a new way. Kwame came to my house last week. I waited. He wanted to talk about you, about James's company. He said the family has been struggling financially, that your father needs medical care, and that the family home in Columbus needs significant repairs. He said he thought you would want to help. He said that. He said you had always been family regardless of what happened, and that family takes care of family. I was quiet for a moment. Priya said, He also asked me if I thought you would respond better to a direct request or to. She paused. He said, should I go through someone she trusts? I told him that was not something I was willing to do. I thanked Priya. I told her she had done nothing wrong by telling me. She said she wanted me to be prepared. I told her I was. I hung up. I opened the folder. Item 31. Kwame approached mutual contact. Reconnaissance and framing in advance of contact. Red pen. Dated. That night after Imani was asleep, I told James everything. He read the summary I had written. He was quiet in the way that meant he was thinking rather than reacting. Then he said what he always said in these moments. What do you want to do? I told him I wanted to be ready. He said we would be. He did not tell me what to feel about my family. He had never told me what to feel about my family. He stood beside me while I figured it out, and he trusted me to figure it out, and that trust was not a small thing. I was going to return to that trust later in this story. Keep that in mind. The following week I called a solicitor. Her name was Yolanda Bright, a family and civil attorney in Chicago whom I had used for our estate documents. I described the situation. She was efficient and practical and told me in 11 minutes what I needed to know. There were no legal grounds for any claim by my family on our assets. Our business structure was sound. Our estate documents protected Imani. Any request for money would be exactly that, a request. I had no obligation. I had no exposure. I had documentation and I had a clean legal position. She said one more thing. Nadia, what you are describing is a manipulation pattern that works precisely because the target cares about the relationship. The best preparation is not legal. It is knowing what you are willing to say before they say what they have planned. I thanked her. I drove home. I pulled the accordion folder out of the filing cabinet and sat with it for 2 hours, reading from the beginning, from item 1, from the letter in cream paper with my father's careful handwriting. I read through 11 years. I noted what I knew. I prepared. If this is hitting close to home, I want you to know that I see you. Drop it in the comments if you have been through something like this, and please subscribe if you have not. It means more than you know. Our company's growth attracted the attention of a business publication in Nairobi that ran a feature on diaspora-led infrastructure development. James was profiled. The piece was substantive and traveled widely in the relevant professional circles. It was also shared on LinkedIn by colleagues, retweeted, republished in a development finance newsletter with 30,000 subscribers. A week after the Nairobi piece, I noticed 4 more views on my LinkedIn from Ohio area accounts. The digital footprint of a family preparing to move. Kwame called me directly 2 weeks later, first time in 11 years. The call came on a Wednesday morning while I was reviewing a project budget. His voice was familiar and strange simultaneously, the way a room looks when you return to it after a long absence and find it has been slightly rearranged. He said, Nadia, it has been too long. I agreed it had been. He said he had been thinking about the family, about Dad. About the distance between all of us and whether it had to stay that way. He said he had not handled things well. He used the word better to describe how things could have gone, not wrong. He said he thought we could find a way forward if we were both willing. I said I was open to a conversation. He said he and Dad were going to be in Chicago in 2 weeks and he hoped we could get together. I said I would be available. I hung up. I wrote down every word he had said. Every word I had said with a timestamp. Item 32. Red pen. Yolanda had been right. They were coming. Kwame and my father. I did not know about the spreadsheet yet. I suspected a document of some kind. I had been watching them watch me for 2 years. I knew the shape of the approach. What I did not know was the specific number. I found out 3 days before they arrived. May messaged me again. This time with information she had not intended to share. A sentence that seemed like context but was actually content. She wrote, I hope things go okay when they visit. Kwame said there are some financial matters he is hoping you can help with. Your father's health has been difficult. I read the message 3 times. Financial matters, plural, hoping you can help. I replied warmly and said I looked forward to seeing them. I closed the app. I opened the folder. The morning before they arrived, I pressed Imani's uniform and made her lunch and watched her leave for school with her violin case and her enormous backpack, and thought about who she was, 11 years old, calm and focused and unfairly perceptive for her age. She had James's patience and my mother's eyes, and a way of sitting with difficult information until she understood it that made her the most naturally honest person I knew. She did not know what was happening. She was at school for both the arrival and the departure. I preferred it that way. They arrived at 11 on a Thursday. Kwame's rental in our driveway. He had his father's posture and his mother's silence, and the specific energy of a man who has prepared something and is holding it in reserve. My father got out of the car slowly. He was 71. He had aged in ways I had not been present to see incrementally. His hair was fully gray. He moved with the deliberateness of a man who has learned that his body requires more attention than it used to. He looked at the house. He looked at the garden. He looked at me on the front step for a moment before he said anything. Nadia. His voice was exactly the same. Dad. I opened the door. I did not hug either of them. I led them inside. I brought them to the kitchen, not the living room. The living room was where the framed company certificate hung beside Imani's school photos and a print James's mother had brought from Laos. The kitchen was where the accordion folder was, already on the table, already closed. I poured water. I sat. They sat. Kwame looked at the folder. He said nothing about it yet. My father looked around the kitchen. His eyes moved across the room and stopped at the refrigerator, where Imani's drawings were held with magnets beside a school photo from September. Imani at 11 in her school uniform, looking directly at the camera, serious and clear. My father looked at that photo for what I counted as 8 seconds. Something moved in his face. I watched it move and then close again. The same controlled discipline I had inherited from him. The same ability to contain what you feel until you have decided what to do with it. Then Kwame opened a folded sheet of paper and set it on the table between us. He had printed it from a spreadsheet. Columns, items, numbers. It was in its structure a document I would have recognized in any professional context as a request formatted to resemble an invoice. He talked through it. My father's medical treatment for a cardiac condition that had been managed but required ongoing care, $180,000. The family home in Columbus, foundation issues and a roof replacement, $120,000. A shortfall in my father's retirement savings that Kwame described as a gap they had not adequately planned for, $250,000. Abina's mother's care, which Kwame had taken on as a family obligation, $90,000. And a request he called a family investment fund of $100,000 to address ongoing needs. Total, $740,000. He presented this without raising his voice. He was an engineer. He presented data. While he spoke, I kept my face still. I did not look at the spreadsheet. I looked at Kwame. He had my father's certainty and my mother's capacity for organization and a lifetime of conviction that he was the one who understood what the family needed. He was not a bad person. He had done a bad thing for 11 years and was now asking me to resolve it financially. Those two facts existed simultaneously and I did not need to collapse them into one. Kwame finished. He looked at me. My father had not spoken. He looked at his hands on the table, the large, careful hands of a man who had built things all his life and was now sitting in his daughter's kitchen in a city he had never visited asking for money through his son because he could not bring himself to do it directly. I looked at him for a long time. Then I looked at Kwame. Then I stood up. I walked to the filing cabinet in my office. The accordion folder was already on the table, but I had left something in the cabinet deliberately. The original letter, my father's letter on cream paper from year one that I had kept for 11 years in a clear sleeve at the front of the documents. I picked it up. I brought it back. I set it on the table next to the spreadsheet. 2 documents. His list of what he wanted. My record of what had been done. Kwame looked at the folder. "What is that?" I said. "You brought a document. I have one too." I opened the folder to the first tab. I pulled out the first item. A birthday card in a white envelope with the flap tucked rather than sealed, the way cards come back when someone has not bothered to reseal them. I set it on the table. Item 1. Birthday card, mailed March 2014. Returned, April 2014. I pulled out the second item. The photo from our wedding, Marcus and me on the steps of the Chicago venue. Returned. I pulled out my father's letter. I placed it in front of him. His own handwriting on cream paper. My father looked at the letter. His jaw moved. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not perform. I read through the items the way I present quarterly reports. Factual, organized, item by item, tab by tab, year by year. I read the voicemail transcript from my father's birthday, year 1. I read the text from Kwame requesting I remove myself from social media. I read Priya's call summary about the community narrative Abina had built. I showed them the envelope from year 6, the birthday card that had been opened and resealed with transparent tape and sent back. The envelope with the photo of Imani drawing at the drafting table. I held it up. Someone opened this, I said, looked at their granddaughter's face, then sent it back. I set it on the table. Kwame looked at the envelope. He did not look at my father. My father was very still. I moved to the last tab, the LinkedIn screenshots. The Ohio-based account created 4 months before their visit. Ama's messages. Priya's account of Kwame's visit to her house. Item 31. I read it aloud. Kwame listened. His expression did not change. He was engineered for composure, but his hands had moved, both flat on the table now, a posture I recognized from my father. The contained posture of a man who has been confronted with something accurate. I closed the folder. The metal clasp clicked. I placed my hands flat on the table and looked at both of them. You brought a spreadsheet, I said. 11 years of silence, itemized as a list of financial needs, presented in the kitchen of a house you have never visited, to grandchildren you have never held. Kwame said, Nadia, the family has had real difficulties. I said, I know. I have been watching you track mine for 2 years. He said, that is not what this is. I said, the LinkedIn account suggests otherwise. My father spoke for the first time. His voice was low and deliberate in the way it had always been. He said, I was wrong to send back your letters. The kitchen was completely quiet. Kwame looked at him. My father looked at the cream paper letter on the table. His own words, he said, I did not understand what I was losing. I was following what Kwame believed was right. He paused. Kwame was not right, and I was not brave enough to say so. Kwame said, Dad. My father raised one hand slightly, the gesture of a man who has decided to say something and will not be redirected. He said, James is a good man. I saw that the first time I met him, and I chose not to trust what I saw. I chose Kwame's certainty over my own perception. That was a failure. It was my failure, not yours. His eyes were dry. He was a man who had grieved structurally for 11 years and had no tear left for the visible kind. He said, I do not expect forgiveness today. He looked at the envelope with the transparent tape, at the photo of Imani inside it. He said, Is she well? My daughter, who he had never met, who he had returned the face of 6 years ago because he was following a certainty that was not his. Yes, Dad, she is well. He nodded once. He closed his eyes briefly. He opened them. Kwame said, This is not how I intended this to go. I looked at him. I know. You intended the financial conversation to go first. He was quiet. I continued. You have spent 2 years researching our company's valuation and sending people to assess our situation. You organized a request that was formatted to look like family obligation. You brought Dad as context. Kwame said, The financial needs are real. I said, I believe some of them are. I believe Dad's medical needs are real. I believe the house needs repairs. I believe you have taken on obligations that are genuinely heavy. I picked up the spreadsheet. I do not believe this document was created because you missed me. Kwame said nothing. I set the spreadsheet down. If you want a relationship with my daughter, that starts with an apology, not to me, to her, not today, when you are ready to mean it. And it starts with being honest about what the last 11 years were. I looked at Abina's absence in the room, including the work that was done in the community to explain my absence in a way that protected everyone except me. Kwame's jaw moved, he said. Abina was trying to manage a difficult situation. I said, Abina was managing a narrative. Those are different things. He had no answer for that. I looked at my father. I said, Dad, I'm not going to give you money today, not because I can't, because I will not let money be the thing that opens this door after 11 years. If you want to know Imani, that conversation starts differently. It starts with you and me separately, without a spreadsheet between us. My father looked at the table for a long time. Then he looked at me. He said, I would like that. I said, then call me. Not through Kwame. Call me. He nodded. He would. I believed him. I walked them to the door. Kwame paused in the hallway. He said, I did not know you had been keeping all of that. I said, I know. That is why it was important that you saw it. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I had not seen on him before, which was the expression of a man who has just understood that the person he underestimated had been building a record of the underestimation. He walked out. My father stopped at the door. He looked at the framed certificate on the living room wall, our names side by side. He looked at Imani's school photo on the side table. He looked at me. He said, Your mother would have been proud. He was out the door before I could respond. I stood in the hall for a while. Imani came home at 3:42. She took off her shoes at the door the way she always did. She came into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator and stood in its cold light the way she always did, reading the options with the deliberation of a person who takes choices seriously. I watched her from the table. She pulled out an apple and sat across from me and said, You look like something happened. I said something did. She said, Do you want to tell me? I looked at my daughter, 11 years old, patient, clear. James's patience, my mother's eyes, her own specific way of sitting with difficult things. I said, Later, when I know how to tell it right. She nodded. She bit her apple. She said, Was it the men who were here? I said, Yes. Are they okay? I said I thought they might be, eventually. She nodded again. She was already doing what she did, sitting with the information until she understood it. I watched her and thought about the accordion folder in the filing cabinet. I hoped I would never add a 34th item. I believed, for the first time in a long time, that I might not have to. My father called on a Tuesday, 3 weeks later, 9 in the morning, his time. He had always been a morning person. He asked about Imani. I told him she was in school. He asked what she liked. I told him, bridges, violin, etymology, long walks that she narrated in detailed commentary. He was quiet for a moment. He said she sounded like her grandmother. Yes, I said, she does. He asked if he could call again. I said yes. He said, not about anything else, just to talk. I said that was the only kind of call I would answer. He understood. We hung up. The calls continued, every 2 weeks. Careful, slow, the way something frozen thaws from the outside in, never in a rush. Kwame sent an email 4 weeks after the visit. Long, carefully composed, several drafts visible in its structure. He acknowledged specific things. The narrative Abina had maintained in the community, his use of Priya as an intermediary, the reconnaissance period before the visit. He did not describe all of it fully, but he named enough to show he understood what had been done. He did not write the word sorry until the last paragraph. When he wrote it, it was plain and specific. I am sorry for what we did. Not sorry if you felt. Not sorry for any misunderstanding. I am sorry for what we did. I printed the email. I labeled it, not with the red pen and the folder tab, in a different drawer. The beginning of a different kind of record. Item 1. Abina called in December. She did not call on speakerphone. She called from her car. I could tell from the ambient sound. She said she had been thinking about how to do this for a long time. She said she had told the people she had told things to that she had not told the full story. She could not take back what had been said. She knew that. but she had said something corrective and she wanted me to know she had. I thanked her. I meant it. It was not everything. It was not close to enough to rebuild 11 years. But it was real, and it was hers, and I took it for what it was. James, when I told him, was quiet in the way that meant he was absorbing rather than processing. Then he said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly, I said. Like a door opened that I was not sure would ever open, and like I need to walk through it slowly. He said, "Take as long as you need." He meant it the way he meant everything, completely and without reservation. I took his hand. We sat in the kitchen in the good quiet that comes after something large and structural has shifted and you are both still in the room together, and that is enough. Imani met my father for the first time on a Sunday in February. He drove from Columbus with Kwame. He stood in our doorway, older than his photos, careful in his movements, and when Imani looked up at him, she said, "You have the same eyes as my mom." He did not say anything for a moment. He looked at her the way you look at something you lost and found in a different form. Then he said, "You look like your grandmother." Imani considered this. She said, "Can you tell me about her?" They sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. My father talked about my mother and Imani asked questions with the focused attention she gave to bridge drawings and etymology and the names of birds. I stood in the doorway for a while, and then I went to do other things, because they needed the space to find each other without me managing it. The accordion folder sits in my filing cabinet. 33 items, 11 years. I have not added a 34th, I do not intend to, but I have not removed anything either. My mother taught me that documentation is not about revenge, and it is not about holding things over people. It is about knowing what actually happened so that when someone tries to rewrite it, you have the receipts. And receipts do not argue. They do not negotiate, they do not forgive or condemn. They just tell the truth. And I spent 11 years making sure I had the truth in a form that could not be disputed. Here is what 11 years of silence taught me. People who tell you that you have options are usually people who have already chosen which option they need you to take. People who maintain a silence for years and then break it when the numbers change are not people who have changed. They are people who have recalculated. And there is a difference between the door opening because someone grew and the door opening because someone saw a reason to open it. You deserve to know which one you are dealing with before you step through. My father grew, I believe that. The opening of the envelope with Imani's photo in year 6 was real. The call on a Tuesday morning from his time zone, no spreadsheet attached, just his voice and a question about who his granddaughter is. That was real. Some people grow slowly and in the wrong direction for a long time and then find the right direction when someone holds up a folder and says, "Here's what happened," and the truth is too clear to manage around. That was my father. I'm going to find out whether it was also Kwame. I'm going to find out carefully over time in conversations that do not have spreadsheets in them. That is my story. 11 years, 33 items, 1 green accordion folder. If this story reminded you that your documentation is not spite, it is self-respect, share it with someone who needs to hear that. If you have been told your record keeping is holding a grudge, drop a comment, because those of us who file things are not grudge keepers. We are truth keepers. And there is a difference. Subscribe if you have not yet. Drop a comment. I will see you in the next one.